Okay. Well, good evening again. I'm John Hess. I'm president of AVIS, and I want to thank the Memorial Hall Library for hosting us tonight. They've hosted other events, and there's another one coming up next week, a talk on edibles in the woods, followed a week later by Russ Cohen, who will be doing the talk, but also then he'll be doing a walk through the woods and the Peggy Keck Reservation looking for edibles. So if you're a forager, please do join us. In a few minutes, I'll introduce David Dargy, who will make a presentation, introduction for our speaker tonight. Now we went off again. No, there it is. So I just wanted to take a moment to inform you, as you perhaps know, this is the AVIS 125th anniversary, founded in 1894. And so this full year we've been having walks and talks and art shows and history exhibits at the History Center. The Addison Gallery is doing an exhibit in the fall. Starting within the next week, there will be art displayed on the trails. And in a few days, you'll be able to look online and see where there are 12 different artists who are doing art on the trails. So there's just a lot of things going on to try and celebrate the open space that our forefathers and foremothers, as it were prescient enough to figure out a way to save this land and make it available to everybody to enjoy into the future. So one of the things we're doing this year in the 125th anniversary is also trying to raise enough money to set up an endowment so that we can protect that land. We've always been pretty good at raising money to buy land when we need to, or to raise money, particularly through our memberships, to raise money to help us keep the land open. If a tree falls down, you have to have a chainsaw to cut the tree, and you have to have wood to make boardwalks. We've been able to do that, but we've set a goal this year of raising $125,000 in our 125th year to be able to save that as our endowment and use the interest from that and keep building it, of course, to protect the land and remove invasives. And that brings me back to Richard Berry again, our speaker tonight. He's going to speak about a particular reservation that he's been the warden of, but he's also done an analysis of many of our reservations. And that analysis sets the groundwork for us to then go in and work on those reservations and remove the invasives. So I want to thank you, Richard, for doing that, as well as being a warden for so many years of the Burns Reservation. So many, that's all right. You did a lot of work in those 3 years, and you'll get into that, I'm sure. But David, why don't you come up? David Dargy, our land manager, will more formally introduce Richard, and thank you all also for coming.
You know, it was 7 o'clock. I thought it was nighttime, and on my drive in, the sun was up there. Isn't this great? I just love it this time of year. June is wonderful. So tonight, it's all about AVIS volunteers. And I look around the room, and just about everybody here is an AVIS volunteer. I want to thank everybody in the room. Thank you very much. And every now and then, we get a very unusual volunteer. No, not unusual, a very special volunteer. And that person lately has been Richard Barry. Richard, you took a overgrown, invasive plant reservation, and you turned it into a gem. We want to thank you very much, and we'd like to hear what you have to say about it. This is Richard Barry, the warden of the Burns Reservation.
Hi, thank you everybody for coming, to come and listen to me talk about something that's been a huge part of my life the last few years. So I'm actually moving to California, where my family and I are getting on the road on June 15th to go. So I'm glad that I still had time to do this, and I've been getting a lot of work done. It's still at the Burns Reservation. I can't stay away. So this right here. This is basically the quote that defines my life. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. And that's a quote by somebody who was very inspirational to me when I was, I don't know how old, but 10 something, whatever, younger. Aldo Leopold in the Sand County Almanac that was a book one of the first books that changed my life and sort of, led me on a certain trajectory. Because when you really think about this, what this means is that what we all should be doing is increasing the stability of the environment all around us, and that leads into a lot of things. Like when you're really trying to create stability, like the way an ecosystem does. And so here, just another. This is basically what I consider what my life is for. Outside of my family is to help nature build and restore ecosystems that are actually functioning. Unlike there's so many areas that are considered conservation land or whatever that are around that are just completely engulfed in all kinds of invasive species, and there's almost nothing. Like they're just complete wrecks of ecosystems. Usually because they're coming back from farming, and that's what I've found is that when anywhere that's been farmed and the soil's been tilled, it just absolutely just wrecks everything, and they're completely full of invasives now. All these places. So this is my second home. the last few years, the Burns Reservation. Starting in 2016. David Dargy, I'd already been talking to him about this reservation, but not so much being a warden, but about the different things with, like, I wanted to plant a tree there and stuff, and so he worked with me, and we had like probably a dozen or more big Norway maples removed there, and that whole area that's the sunny area there in the back of the pond right now is where all those trees were, and I've been so impressed, and I've really been so happy with the way Avis has worked with me on this, and specifically David, to basically make this happen. He said, just let me know mark which trees need to be removed, and we'll get rid of them. And I was like, oh, okay, that's such a I don't know, like a responsibility, like to be putting, and trust, because it was kind of shocking, I thought there'd be more like opposition maybe, or just some of the neighbors wouldn't like it, having all these trees removed, but everybody thought it was great. So it was kind of a wreck right afterwards, just because like it was just a complete dump and full of invasive species. So they pretty much just cut everything down, and so that was an area that I did a lot of replanting in, starting right away, and right after those trees were removed in 2016. But this is now. And some of these little seedlings I planted just a few years ago were like 20 feet tall now. This is another area now. This is just kind of looking at the pond from the other direction, with the fire station and Clark Road being out like in the distance there. This area was just nothing but barberry, and it was like there's 6 or 8 or whatever, 10 different invasive species. It was just completely tangled with, right up to the shoreline, including all the shore, where all that green stuff down by the water there is skunk cabbage mostly. And that was just completely, and I just went through it one end to the other, and so this is very soon. I don't really have any like actual before pictures. This is the closest thing, because the real before, it just looked like a green wall. Yeah, so there's nothing really to see this. This is kind of, I think that's why I never bothered to even take any pictures then. But this looked kind of dramatic. All this dead stuff in here is all invasive bittersweet and multiflora rose and 2 different species of invasive euonymus, and it's all dead here. And you know, it's amazing how quickly it just sort of disappears once you cut it. And this was back when initially when I did all this work in 2016. I did it all just cutting things to the ground and not using any herbicide at all. Number one, I didn't have an applicator. You're supposed to have an applicator's license, number one, but I just didn't really see the need to, because I figured, well, you could just cut everything and then just, when it'll resprout back, but then just break off the sprouts, no big deal. But it turned out that that doesn't work, because the plants are always going to outlast you, and you're going to think they're dead, and then they still come back 4 years later, 5 years later. If you just, you know, it doesn't work. Anyway, this is now the same spot. It's kind of cool. I never did this intentionally, but I just, you know, I like taking photos of things all over, like seeing what's, you know, just documenting what's going on. And this is the before, and then you can see the tree way to the right that kind of, it goes up and off the photo on the right. That's the one at the end of the boardwalk now. It's an American elm that hopefully Dutch elm disease doesn't kill it too soon, or maybe, you know, you never know, maybe it'll live to an old age. But this, I moved the trail over a bit here, and then there was a Boy Scout made this boardwalk through here last year, and it's just like, this area is just so, every time I go and I look at this place, I can't believe what's happened, because what's all in there now is it's basically like a whole like really healthy native shrub thicket or shrub swamp. It slopes up to the left there, but it's super wet. It's like there's a lot of water draining down through there, so it's full of skunk cabbage, and it's all full of silky dogwood and gray dogwood, which are two phenomenal like native shrubs. And you know, you usually don't see them anywhere because everything's covered in bittersweet all over the place, and buckthorn and all this other stuff, in Japanese knotweed and the whole litany. You don't see these species anymore, or not anything like you should, certainly. And then the area to the right, I had some shrubs I planted, native things like spice bush and silky dogwood, and I think it was muskrats that came and they ate everything, because the muskrats have been going crazy at this place this year. But you know, I mean, everything just sprouts. I mean, not necessarily, but something grows back, and even if they kill the thing that they happen to eat. But I just consider them kind of part of the whole process of the land healing and, you know, recovering from centuries of you know, just the whole pattern of the forest being cut and being, you know, this has been dumped on too for probably 100 years or more. The whole area here is like full of intact bottles, broken bottles, and all sorts of things. The trees and the plants couldn't care less, but you got to be pretty careful digging. And so this is I've mentioned invasive plants. A lot of people aren't very clear on what that means. From an ecological standpoint, it has to meet these two criteria. It's not native to a specific location, and with that, and a lot of people also, the concept of native is a little confused in some ways. Basically, we consider native to be plants that were here before the Europeans arrived. That's the bottom line. I mean, there's been different patterns of, you know, how things have been done in different parts of the world and all, but here it's basically when the Europeans arrived, that's when the non-native plants started showing up. You know, spread all kinds of different ways. But so basically, they're not native, and they also they cause damage. They're not weeds. It's different from a weed, because what invasive, they have the tendency to spread to a degree believed to cause damage to the environment, human economy, or human health. So you can argue, you know, that lawn weeds and stuff could be considered invasive, but the main thing I consider is that they're able to get into basically undisturbed natural areas and get in there, like just from birds or from the wind or whatever. They get in there, they get established, they grow up, and then they basically take over the area. And that's what we're looking. I mean, that's the reality of what's going on. And also, feel free to, you know, ask any questions or, you know, butt in, or comments, questions anytime. So these are the invasive plants. I just made this little spreadsheet of the invasive plants that were and probably all still are in the Burns Reservation, you never really are done, but you can get to like 99% or something, like 95, something like that. But you always have to keep up with these things. But so there's Norway maple, and these are real invasive plants. I mean, they all meet those criteria that they're all not native, and they're all wreaking havoc through what was and is becoming again an ecosystem there at this place, at this Burns Reservation. Norway maple, garlic mustard, Japanese barberry, Asiatic bitter, or people call it Oriental bittersweet, winged euonymus or burning bush that everybody has in their yards, European spindle tree. This one's kind of uncommon, but it's kind of like, or at least there was a lot of them down there at the Burns Reservation, but they're not very commonly seen around. But it's kind of like a burning bush on steroids, like with a 12-inch or more diameter trunk. There were a whole bunch of those. Winter creeper, which again, everybody's got this in their gardens. Japanese knotweed, which you see along roadsides all over. And there was a small area of that in the Burns Reservation, an area that had been it's always associated with dumping, basically, either like fill soil, or at the Burns Reservation it was just dumping of yard waste and all sorts of debris and waste and stuff. And a little bit of knotweed is in there with the mess, and it's able to get going and take over. Glossy buckthorn, which is a huge problem all over the place. It wasn't actually that it wasn't that bad in the Burns Reservation, actually, but lots of other things were. So Dame's rocket, not many people are familiar with what that is, but it looks like phlox, and you see it flowering all around right now. Privet, privet hedges. People have privet hedges all over. There's places here, right here in Andover, where there's privet, just an entire what should be like a forest is just a privet thicket. The shrub honeysuckles, marrow honeysuckle, purple loosestrife, which is cool. I know there's been a project going on to introduce beetles that will eat purple loosestrife, and I see the little purple loosestrife plants along the pond of the Burns, and they're covered in beetle holes, and they're just getting chewed to Swiss cheese. So that's nice to see. What I've been doing with the loosestrife is just like it has those bright colored flowers later in the season, and I've just been cutting it off like before it really gets going with the flowers, so you don't get any more seeds. Common buckthorn, which is another invasive species of buckthorn. We have two. And multiflora rose, and that's a rose bush. I was cutting multiflora rose at the Burns Reservation with 2-inch diameter trunks at least, and they were growing way up into the trees, giant. That's what all of that dead stuff was, and a lot of it was in that photo. It was multiflora. So, so again, here's the fall of the year when I started, fighting the invasives there. This tree here has recovered so nicely. This one in the photo. So this is it from another angle. You see this all bittersweet up in the trees there, all dead now, and now completely gone. So that's the before. It was just basically all tangled and vines everywhere, and there was almost every square foot of the property, with very few exceptions, had invasive plants on it. A lot of it's actually the pond, so that that was pretty free of invasives, I think, except for the loosestrife around it. But so this is what it was all like before, and so now I'm seeing, like, the thing that's been amazing is to see how quickly the system comes back. Like, what I consider, these are all components of an actual healthy, real functioning ecosystem. There's a lot of these species, and these are just missing from so many places. Like, there's so many things that, like, well, it must be an ecosystem because there's trees and bushes and whatever, but the trees are all dying and are dead or half dead or whatever, and everything underneath is all invasive. So it's not really even a functioning forest anymore at that point, because it's just going backwards and just being destroyed by the invasives that are in there. And this is blood. This is fantastic when I saw this, and this is bloodroot, which is a really nice native forest wildflower. It flowers. This one hasn't. It did flower, but I missed it. It flowers really early in the spring, and it's got those distinctive leaves like that. And this was surrounded all by winter creeper, but I've gotten rid of all the winter creeper. I just by pulling that out all around there. And then this is fantastic to see these come in, trilliums actually, which I'd never even seen in Andover before. There's a bunch of these in there now. These are nodding trillium, so it's not one of the super showy kind of but I thought they were fantastic, and you can see the flower there. This was all just covered in invasive shrubs and vines and everything else, just completely engulfed. And I for all I know, these weren't even. A lot of species are actually able to come back just from seeds that are still there in the ground that have just been, unable to grow for, decades or whatever. And then when you get the mess out of there, they come back without planting or without anything, just on their own. Plus, there's also seeds getting spread around and everything too that are able to, they're not just, it's not just a huge green mass full of, of tangled branches and everything. And so these are the trees that I've planted at the Burns Reservation. All in that, pretty much all in that area that was like all clear, where the larger trees were all removed, or pretty much everything was removed in there. So or ones that are like little seedlings that I've kind of been pruning and shaping and whatever. But so the first one's sugar maple. The next one's a serviceberry, black birch. This is a paper birch. It's a bronze birch borer resistant cultivar of paper birch that I had left over from a job I was doing, and I didn't have anywhere to use it, so I went and planted it in an area that was just all dead invasive, out in back actually. American hornbeam, Atlantic white cedar, pagoda dogwood, and butternut. There's a bunch of butternuts in there, which is super cool because butternuts are dying all over the place around there. I guess they used to be relatively common in Andover. Black gum, eastern white pine, white oak. I planted a 12-inch tall white oak in 2016. This was all pretty much I put all in the spring of 2016, which was also the year we had that drought where it didn't rain the whole summer either. And I only watered them a few times, just with a bucket and water from the pond, and everything. It didn't grow like gangbusters the first year, but they sure are now. Because the white oak that was 12 inches, it's like probably 10 feet or 8 to 10 feet, something like that now. It's growing like 4 feet a year or more a year. It's unbelievable. The white oak, swamp white oak, red oak, sassafras, which I saw one at a nursery, and I had to plant that because I love them. Basswood and American elms. There's a number of American elms that came up on their own, and I planted one, which is this Valley Forge. It's a variety of American elm called Valley Forge, and it's resistant to Dutch elm disease. And that tree is probably 20 feet tall now, and I could not believe my eyes when I saw how fast that thing's been growing. And I've been kind of pruning it, because they'll get pretty terrible branching if you don't kind of shape them a little bit when they're young. And then shrubs that I planted: buttonbush, summer sweet, silky dogwood, gray dogwood, American hazelnut, witch hazel, spicebush, bayberry, chokecherry. Rubus odoratus is purple flowering raspberry, which is it's a fantastic. You need to give it a lot of room, but it's a super tough plant. It's like 5 or 6 feet tall, maybe at the most, and it is a species of raspberry, but it has these big pinkish purple flowers through not quite yet. So I guess late June into July, maybe for a pretty long time. But it just spreads like crazy, and which is a lot of times it's not really what you want if it's in your little garden plot or something. But if it's an area that's like an area that was full of Japanese knotweed before that you just killed or something, or it was all infested with invasives and they were all removed, that's a really good plant to use to put in there, because they just spread like crazy. They're beautiful. They're native. They provide all kinds. The flowers, you get tons of bees on the flowers. The fruits are eaten by, they're edible fruits that you can eat, and they're really good. But animals eat them like crazy too. So it's only, everything has its ups and downsides. And the thing is, it spreads a lot, which is, depending on how you look at it, good or bad. Elderberry, arrowwood viburnum, and nannyberry. So these are all, and these are just. This is just an example of the incredible diversity native shrubs that we have here in this area, that most of these are rarely or never used in landscapes at all. I've used them all in my own landscaping in jobs that I've done for clients, but you hardly ever see most of these, which is, it's absurd. So this is just I took a few photos just of like what it looks like now. These the one in the front there is a nannyberry, and the one in the middle, it's a type of viburnum. The one in the middle is a pagoda dogwood, which there's a little volunteer seedling in my yard that I just moved down here and planted. And there's a few others. There's a hornbeam, and there's viburnums and stuff like that. But it's been a bit of work. It's been a continuing process for there was still a lot of bittersweet in here just this year in this area that I've still been working on. So but it's 95% better, at least, than better condition than it was, and it's on the trajectory toward stability, towards increasing stability, and that's what I'm always looking at. Which stability meaning like that. Basically, all the available niches, and it's ecological type terms, but basically that there's no like voids in there, because when there's voids, like still there's plenty of voids in this scenario right here. So in those voids, you're always getting stuff seeding in, and especially when it's sunny like that. So, but these plants are growing there, and this year I think they're gonna, with all the rain we've had and the weather's just been phenomenal for stuff to grow. So I think they're gonna put on a lot of growth this year. This is the elm, the Valley Forge American elm. That this is it just like a week ago, and it's probably over 20 feet tall. And this was a 12-inch seedling. And it's not like I don't no fertilizer or no anything, but this is a testament though, and this is a situation that I see around Andover. I've seen quite a bit, where this is a site that's been dumped on for 100 years or 200 years or whatever. It's been basically like the neighborhood dump. And with all the stuff that's been dumped, it's all kinds of debris and, I'm sure stuff that's long since decomposed and, building materials and all kinds of crazy stuff. But tons of organic matter, I'm sure, went in there. And so the soil is like just in a lot of, like where this elm is just like ridiculously thick black soil. So this is something you see quite a bit in these dumping areas where you have these conditions. Usually what they end up with is just an enormous tangle of giant bittersweet vines and buckthorn and all sorts of stuff. But they also have an unbelievable potential though too. Like if you get that stuff out of there, the growth rates that you can see on plants that you actually want are incredible. And I've seen that on everything in there. And you can see, what's kind of cool is you can go there now, you can see like pretty much everything in there was planted spring 2016. So you can see, as seedlings, so you can see how fast they grow. This tree is just, and this one's the most Dutch elm disease resistant cultivar of American elm. So it should be around for a long time. Atlantic white cedar I planted down there. This is one of my favorite trees, and it only grows in a handful of locations in Andover. So I found this. This is it's just a plain seed. It's not any kind of funky variety, with any weird color or anything like this. Just a plain seed-grown Atlantic white cedar. So that would be kind of cool to get one down there, and maybe someday it'll start producing seeds, and there'll be some more growing around there. That's the kind of place where they like to be, right on the edge of the water. This is something that, I've seen a few of these down there, wood frogs. And just this year, a painted turtle. I never knew there were turtles in there, and I don't, for all I know, there are beavers in there too now, which I hadn't seen before. But this guy let me just get right up near him. He was just sitting there around the edge of the pond. So as far as dealing with the invasives, this is a tool that I couldn't live without. If you're dealing with any kind of invasive trees or shrubs, this tool is absolutely essential. And what it is it basically, it's just a lot of people don't like herbicide, and there's all. But the bottom line for me is that if you're serious about restoring and rebuilding ecosystems, then herbicide has to, very safe and judicious use of these things. It has to be a tool in your toolbox, or else you're just basically giving up. And I'm not going to give up. So you just fill it up with herbicide concentrate. Like, and I use, the stuff that's around is Roundup glyphosate. It comes in a million different names. It's the safest herbicide there is you can really be using and legitimately for a number of reasons. But the quantities you're using are absolutely tiny, and this is a sponge. It's like a sponge tip bottle. So you basically just fill it up with herbicide concentrate, and then when you cut it, you cut the thing down, you cut it to a stump, and then you just apply it like it's like a spongy tip thing on it, and it just soaks it right up. And you put a blue dye in there normally, so you'll see it on the stump. So when you're doing a bunch of them, you know which ones you've treated. And this is what they look like after they've been done. And this is a common buckthorn. And common buckthorn grows like the size of crab apples or something. They get to be pretty. This was like a pretty good sized one, but this keeps it from resprouting. That's the point of this. If you don't do this, if you just cut it and walk away, like I was doing for at least the first year, couple of years down there, you end up with that whole thing just being sprouts all around, and you can go back and break off the sprouts, and they come right back, and they keep coming back, and meanwhile, you got seedlings coming up all around too that are from the, buried in the seed bank, and it ends up basically the invasives end up winning in the end, So, and I did this to succeed. So this was my strategy with a lot, even ones that where this could have even been, this I cut this and herbicided it, but a lot of them I cut them, a year ago, and they were resprouting, and I went back this past winter and cut. You can do this treatment in the winter, and I would cut them right to the ground, right below, and then apply the herbicide to actually get rid of them. And this was done with a buckthorn blaster. I use a lot of different techniques and a lot of different things, but all in all, this is for me and for anybody. I think it's a number one go-to tool. The buckthorn blaster has been amazing because the reason it sounds yes.
Is there like a peak time of year to use that?
As asked, is there a peak time to use like the herbicide on the cut stumps? Anytime except the spring. Like pretty much now, as far as how like the plants are concerned, it's the summertime for them right now. So, but in the spring when like the new leaves are emerging and the branch, you want to wait until the leaves are fully emerged and basically like, they're not pulling a lot of stuff up out of their roots anymore at that point, because that's what happens. Like if you put it on there in the spring, the plant's not really absorbing anything down, and it's just all the pressure on it is just pushing everything out, so it won't even be absorbed, and then you're just wasting your time, and you're just putting herbicide on something for no reason. So, but any other summer, fall, winter, all work just fine for this technique. And this is yes.
The part that you cut off, how are you disposing of that so it's not going to make more seeds or whatever?
For the stuff that I cut down, unless you're always better to cut it now and rather than later, no matter what. But like ideally, you're gonna cut the stuff down when it doesn't have any seeds on it. Like it's all the timing. Basically, as long as there's no viable seeds on the plant, which means the fall, basically. Because by the winter the birds have taken them all off and spread the seeds all over the place. So, but basically, what was it again? I'm sorry. What you
You could burn it.
to dispose of it? Yeah. You can just. What I do, I just cut it up and lay it on the ground, and the stuff rots so fast you wouldn't believe it. Like there was piles like 3-4 feet thick of just piles of branches down there. I drag them out and move them over to the back. You can't even find them now. They're gone. So I don't really see any reason that like I always go for like what's the simplest, most effective way of doing things. I don't see any reason. It's just an aesthetic. Like I tell people, tell clients and all. It's just an aesthetic issue. Like basically, if you don't like the way it looks having the stuff there, you can. But there's no, unless it has seeds on it, it's not going to grow back or anything like that. I mean, sometimes if you pull things and they're in like muddy, wet soil, and a bunch of soil comes out with it, and you throw them somewhere, those can regrow into the ground. But from cut stuff, they're not going to. In the tropics that happens, but not here. This is kind of another method that I think has a lot of merit and could be really useful to people, because this is a non-chemical way of basically doing what the herbicide does, called buckthorn baggies. And you can just Google buckthorn baggie. It's a great company, and they're out in, I don't know, they're out in the Midwest somewhere, I think, where buckthorn is an enormous problem. Hasn't gotten to that point here yet or whatever. But yes,
Did that work on bush honeysuckle?
yes, yeah. But this works. This basically what this does. It does just like you just tie it on this. You put it over the stump and then tie it on there real securely with a zip tie, and you fan it out at the base, and it deprives the plant from any sunlight, so it basically can't grow, and then it dies. It just burns itself out. So that's a way that, according to the law, even with a buckthorn blaster or whatever, even if no matter what it is, the most minuscule little amount, you're not legally allowed to apply any pesticide on any property that's not your own basically home. So without a pesticide applicator's license. But this doesn't, that's the nice thing about these guys. They don't require that, but they don't work on bittersweet. They do not work on bittersweet at all. And bittersweet's one of the worst. Bittersweet, you want a buckthorn blaster, or else you're just going to have bittersweet forever. Even excavating out bittersweet, it still grows right back, because it comes right back from like this tiniest little bits of roots and stuff. And I'm just seeing it just absolutely go bananas this year. But bittersweet is just going crazy. This is a Norway maple stump that is providing great service to its ecosystem now. It's a Norway maple stump with fungus all over it that I killed, and now it's turning into soil. So I thought I'd do like a little summary of like the lessons I learned from this, because I kind of didn't really quite know that much what I was doing when I got started with this. And now 2 years I've been creating ecological landscapes as a business. And I'm going to be doing the same thing in California. So I have a lot more experience, and I think I learned some things that could probably be pretty useful. So the number one thing is you need to have a plan when you're dealing with invasives. You can't, it doesn't make, I see, you can use your time doing this or that, or what you can decide what to use an hour of your time for, but, I like to use it for whatever is the most effective. And unless you have a real plan to like what you're going to do, like, and a really good way to kind of start is just the areas where, you have a lot of native plants, shrubs and trees and things in there, but it's not extremely like what I did at the Burns Reservation was like pretty much one of the worst case scenarios I've ever seen in my life, which I just loved it. I loved the challenge of it, of, kind of seeing what could be done, and, basically proving that, very simple techniques can just create monumental, mind-blowing changes. But you need to have a plan. Also, never cut bittersweet, buckthorn, burning bush, privet, or which is basically any kind of woody, invasive tree or shrub without herbicide, or buckthorn baggie if it's not bittersweet. Or have a plan to go back later. There's ways that, because not everybody can be going around applying pesticides. Even it's pesticides, because herbicide's considered a pesticide. So what you can do is like somebody can go and just like cut, in the winter or something, cut stuff off halfway or whatever, and then somebody can go back later, and then just cut them lower in the summer and the fall, whatever, and then apply herbicide to it. But you need to have that follow up, because what never works ever, it might work for a very short term, but what never works in any kind of long term basis is to just go in and just cut stuff down and then walk away from it, because it just all comes back a lot worse than what you started with, and then and by that point you probably have almost nothing native left in there at all. So then you're just left with, you have to just kill everything and stuff. It's really the problem never gets better on its own, or very, very rarely. Native plants can return and rebuild their populations a whole lot faster than many people believe, if you provide the right conditions and remove the invasives, and then they will. Native trees and shrubs will grow much, much faster than you'd ever believe, from very small seedlings. And all it takes is basically just a small seedling with a good root system, and just keeping it watered for a few, whatever. If you plant in the fall, you usually don't have to water at all, especially if there's like, maybe you want to do it once just to get it soaked in. But usually I plant stuff in the fall and never have to ever water it. But in the spring, depending on how big it is, the bigger they are, the more you'll have to water them more. But you have to make sure they get adequate water, and that you keep the weeds. You have to deal with it because they'll get engulfed in weeds. Like when you get pokeweed that's 8 feet tall, you have to deal with that. There's always going to be follow-up needed. There's always going to be seedlings that'll continue appearing forever, for eternity here. I don't, unless all, like for instance, all bittersweet everywhere is eradicated, which I don't ever see happening because it's just getting worse and worse. And you see a bittersweet vine up in a tree covered in those orange fruits, and those birds, birds strip them off pretty quick and spread the seeds all over the place and just keep adding and adding and adding to the seed bank. So it really helps to be able to identify them when they're little. That helps a lot. Each of us has this is what I've shown. Each of us has a tremendous ability ourselves to help restore ecosystems. I just did this my first year in just my spare time. Actually, all 3 years really in my spare time, and not like didn't use all my spare time, a lot of it, but because nature does most of the work. And that's the bottom line. I mean, everything, plants and trees, they run on carbon dioxide and water and sunlight. So all we really need to do is just kind of try to help sort of set things in motion in the beginning. This is what I started seeing all around in there, white oak seedlings, which is, fantastic. And you can see actually in this photo, those twigs are actually dead twigs of burning bush that's decomposing. And this year I've been absolutely just hammering the whole place. There's tons of seedlings, and I've been pulling them out literally just like square meter by square, just pulling them out and and killing them everywhere. For once, this is the bloodroot. This is what the flower looks like. This is in my own garden, but this is a very cool woodland plant that I really want to see that one spread. So the bottom line is that we can do this. So, anybody have any questions? Yes.
Some of the plants that you mentioned, like the raspberry, where do you get those? Do you get those at nurseries, or
Well, people have asked me what nurseries I recommend, and that it's a big, huge, giant problem. Like there aren't really any native plant nurseries of any magnitude anywhere in this region, which is just ridiculous. But the closest thing for me, for the last couple of years when I was doing this professionally, was Bigelow Nurseries in Northborough. It's fantastic. They have the best selection of tons, and they're really into the owner, Patricia Bigelow. She gets it about native plants and why they're important, and so they obviously have to be able to sell them and stuff. And I've purchased a lot from them. I'm very happy with that place. And also the Garden in the Woods in Framingham, which has a small nursery there, and they have people that really know. I mean, they really know their subject matter better than anybody else. Yes.
small body of water in your land there? Get algae?
There's, when you have, it all depends on what kind of condition the watershed's in. When you're getting like an overgrowth of algae in a body of water, there's excess nutrients that are going in there from something. I mean, there's a lot of nutrients. We don't at the pond there. There's not. It's a really vibrant like ecosystem. It's full of frogs. I mean, it's full of tadpoles, and there's fish in there, and of course turtles. I mean, as I never knew, but and all kinds of things living in there. And it really, the water really. I've been actually surprised at how clear it usually is. When I started as the warden, before I'd seen like the edge of the pond all through the reservation had been like mowed right to the edge of the water. And I as soon as I became the warden, I stopped with that, and I kind of started leaving the edges unmowed. And I planted a lot of different things, a lot of different native wetland plants and things and shrubs and stuff in there. So, I don't know, but also I guess because upstream also, the stream goes down through this whole big wetland swamp thing and swampy area. So, even if the water was coming in there and it was kind of a mess, I think that probably helps clean it out a lot, because it's a whole like nice healthy ecosystem upstream. Which I think things like like what kind of condition the watershed's in. You can probably clean up algae very, very quickly just by filling niches appropriately and not having all this mowed lawn bleeding off nutrients and stuff like that. I think you can probably make a really big impact really quickly. Yes.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of people like to put Kusa dogwoods in their yards because they bloom very nicely. Are those native?
Kusa dogwoods are an invasive species. No one wants to admit that, but they are. I see them coming up a lot, way too often on their own, from seeds, unassisted, to say otherwise. So yeah, we used to have a Kusa dogwood in my yard, and I maybe a couple of years after we moved in, I cut it down. Yes.
Last time I was at Earth, I think I noticed some trees that like the bark had been removed and circle around.
Yeah.
You had done that.
Yeah.
Like taking down that tree?
No, that's just a method to kill the tree standing in place, and then because the idea with that is that they take quite a while to ever come down. A lot of times, what they do is the limbs kind of come off first too, and all they don't necessarily just all go over right because they still stay like really solid for a long time. But that's just to kill them standing in place, so then they are able to serve as standing dead trees for a while. And also not have a huge pile of debris everywhere to have to, to deal with.
Of course, those are Norway maples.
Norway maples, yeah. I've killed every Norway maple in the Burns Reservation. Yes?
Do you have any experience with controlled burning?
No, I don't have any experience with that. Controlled burning is, it's interesting. I know people who do that on residential properties in I forget which, the guy in like Illinois or something. And he creates ecological landscapes and all too. But he actually does that like on home landscapes. But I've never really. The only place I know of that being done is at the Ward Reservation I think on one of those one or two of those south-facing hillsides there, or near the Weir Hill too in North Andover. But most of our forests around here don't really they're not ecosystems that tend to need fire, I mean, a lot of them are adapted to it, like where you have all the pines and oaks and huckleberry and stuff, like those are ecosystems that are certainly adapted to fire, but they don't depend on it. We like the closest thing would be like pitch pines. They kind of pretty much don't really reproduce unless they're the cones are exposed to the heat from fires, but I still see a lot of pitch pines around coming up even without that. So I don't think it's really. I mean, and as far as like to deal with invasive species, it wouldn't really create any long-term benefit because as soon as you went through with the fire, you wouldn't. Most of the stuff wouldn't be killed. First of all, it just kills the top growth, and then you're also going to stimulate like millions and zillions of seeds to sprout at the same time. So you're going to end up with probably just a blanket of buckthorn and stuff like that. So controlled burning would be a real challenge in these places that are so infested now with invasives because they're completely changing these ecosystems. They're nothing like they're turning into like overnight almost into something entirely different.
Would you ever consider a sugar maple to be invasive?
No. Sugar maples I consider them a native tree, although it is interesting with sugar maples, they do behave, I see them behaving, because I'm seeing them come, like, a lot of these forests that are pine and oak and huckleberry and blueberry right now, on the edges, you're getting all this dumping of yard debris and everything, and it's completely changing the soil and killing everything that's in there. It completely wipes out the entire, like whenever you're doing that to intact, what do you call it, forest floor kind of community, you just basically kill almost everything. And then I see sugar maples coming in those because everybody's, with all their leaves and all their stuff they're dumping, there's always sugar maple leaves, and with the leaves there's going to be those little helicopter seeds. And so it's interesting. The Burns Reservation's full of sugar maples because of the reason that all these areas, they're not the original soil. They've all been dumped on. So whatever was there, 300 or 400 years ago, whatever is long gone. And what's there now is just this like dump soil, and it was, I'm sure it was again full, but it's grown into like a really nice healthy forest with giant tall sugar maples that are some of the best ones I've ever seen. So it's kind of, in that way it's kind of stabilizing itself. But sugar maples, they seem to be associated with like really unpleasant disturbance, like that I'm seeing around the edges of a lot of these reservations with all this dumping.
Do you have an issue with deer?
I've seen deer, stuff that has been obviously browsed by deer, but nothing to any great extent. There's the thing ahead, there was actually, I think it was a muskrat, that the purple flowering raspberry all over the hillside there. It was all coming up. It was shooting up these, nice big, thick stalks, and then they were all disappearing. And then there's a trail like going straight up from the pond, right up the hill, like it's like a chute. And I guess it was a muskrat was up there just chewing these things all. It just mowed them all right down in the whole hillside. And they're all coming back now though. And that's the thing I usually find, like that. If you have enough of something, like the silky, the deer eat the silky dogwoods there, but there's like probably an acre of them or something altogether in the various wetlands and stuff. So if they, if they have enough to eat, and if plants tend to be established enough, and native plants are very, very good at rebounding from, that's something they evolved with over, millions of years, is animal browsing. It's just part of life in the forests, and usually if they're well established and they have the root systems are all in there, they come right back. I guess if the deer keep coming back and too often, then they can kill stuff. But I never really worry about it. Never seen them kill anything. Yes.
Rich, I know you've been doing some more of the work on some of the other reservations. I don't know if people are aware of that or not, but given the fact you are leaving, have you done kind of maintenance plans or some sort of maintenance so that follow on the rest of our boards can try to...
Yeah, I wrote one of those up for the green reservation with those little that were like I don't know, like kind of, what do you call reports, on like each a number of reservations. I did one for the green reservation, although I'm kind of getting rid of everything now though, so it's going to be a whole lot less to do on the list. Because I've been going all around the road. The roadsides are one of the worst places with all these reservations. The roadsides are just, a lot of them are full of Norway maples and buckthorn and bittersweet and everything, the whole list. And so with the green reservation, I've been lately going all around the roadsides and just killing everything, because what it does is like this edge effect. You have all these edges and everything, things are gradually spreading into. So me, I look at everything from an ecological standpoint, and when you do that, I look decades into the future, and we have huge changes coming down the pike, with all the different crises that are happening and that are beginning. So the more we can do to try to make these places like resilient and not just like they already have a lot of stress put on them, but when things are just spreading in there from the edges and and then what happens? Then you get a big storm and it knocks a bunch of trees down, and then these invasives just blast through and they just take over the whole place. I've seen absolute nightmares in this town of places that are completely, utterly destroyed by, initially destroyed by the legacy of the agriculture, but since then, what's come right in there is nothing but invasives, and the places are completely destroyed at this point, and would really be better off to just, I think, in some cases, to just completely just remove everything, cut everything down, remove everything, and just start all over again because in some cases like that, there's nothing else you can really do, or just throw up your hands.
What's your opinion on the best way to remove vine-based poison ivy?
To deal with poison ivy? Is it?
Vine-based poison ivy wrapped around trees.
The only real, unless you want to, because it depends on the size of the plant. When they're small, you can pull them out, but when they're larger and they have like a larger root system, you can do the cut and stump treatment on poison ivy if it's a big vine. That works on pretty much any woody plant where you cut a stump to the ground anytime other than in the springtime, and just apply herbicide, like concentrate straight to the cut surface. But otherwise, you can use like a foliar, any herbicide works on it. But pretty much if you want to really kill it and get rid of it, then you need to you're probably going to have to use chemicals on it.
Still dangerous if you're cutting it in the winter?
Yes. Yeah, the oils on all sorts, on the roots, on everything else. It's poison ivies. I get it. That's awful. All winter. Well, thank you all so much for listening to me.